MTN News, you're watching Montana This Morning.
Some pre-election analysis is saying the youth vote is turning out big this year. I'm Gabby Crevitt, and I'll have that story coming up.
A teenager who could have faced adult charges in the murder of a West Yellowstone child makes a deal with prosecutors. Coming up, what will now happen to 15-year-old James Sasser III.
6:30 on this Friday. Chet Lehman, Holly Brantley, Matt Elwell with you here. Congressman Greg Gianforte joining us live here in a few minutes as well. Breaking news this morning coming from Europe. A report of a 7.0 magnitude earthquake in the Aegean between Greece and Turkey. Still getting reports on that, but 7.0 magnitude.
That's significant,
yeah, to say the least.
That's a significant earthquake for sure. And I'm going to be working on some graphics to kind of show you where and all that coming up in just a bit. In the meantime, hey, the morning's fantastic, into the 20s for most of the area this morning. It is going to be a windy afternoon. Our skies are fairly clear to start the day. Our daytime highs expected to be back into the 50s. That's not spooky, but we're going to have a very quick moving system move through. Could bring us a quick shower for part of the area. We'll talk about how that's going to impact your Halloween forecast. It's coming up in just a few minutes.
Well, as the election winds down to its final days, young voter turnout trends and elections have historically been lower compared to older voters.
Yeah, MTN's Gabby Crevitt reports that this year, young voters may be heading to the polls in larger numbers, and that includes here in Montana.
Just days away from Election Day, political researchers are diving into the early voting data to see what the numbers are saying. One group of voters they'll be paying close attention to, the youth vote. A recent study from the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement shows early votes casted by youth ages 18 to 29 are up this year in many parts of the country compared to around the same time as the 2016 general election cycle. Montana is one of the states showing more voter participation among young voters. Back in 2016, around late October, around 8,100 young voters had returned their ballots. As of late last week, the study says around 28,600 ballots were reported returned.
Young people often will vote a little bit later in the election season and are less likely to be voting early compared to their older counterparts. So these next couple of days will really tell us whether we're going to be busting through records on youth voter turnout or not.
Political science professor at Montana State University, David Parker, said young people are very motivated to head to the polls this year. The driving forces?
The economy and pandemic. I mean, these young voters are going into college and having a college experience that they don't like, or if they're not going to college, they're probably going into a job market which is awful because of the pandemic.
The study also showed a significantly higher number of ballots requested by young people in 2020 compared to 2016. But Forward Montana says that number is a bit misleading.
We just opted in a ton of our counties to all mail-in. So people are getting ballots whether or not they request them if they're in one of those counties.
MTN News asked what's fueling young voters in Montana this year.
They've been energized over the last 4 years, and then there's a marijuana initiative on the ballot.
There are a ton of young people that are really motivated and super mobilized by this election and all of the issues, all of the candidates up and down the ballot.
Reporting in Gallatin County, Gabby Crevitt, MTN News.
6:33 now. MTN's Mike Dennison is checking daily with the Secretary of State's office about voter turnout and ballot returns. So far, about 453,500 ballots have been returned. It's about 69% of those mailed out. Around 36,000 have been returned in just the last 24 hours. That means it looks like Montana is heading for a record turnout. Now, in the 2016 presidential election, our previous high, Montana had 517,000 ballots cast. Dennison expects we'll blow past that by this weekend. And at this stage of the game, most officials are saying drop off your ballot, don't mail it in, to make sure you do meet the deadline.
Well, many voters have already cast their ballots, but that doesn't mean we'll know the election results right away.
Yeah, an expert tells us all of the ingredients are there for this election to be highly contested.
There are a lot of different reasons why the election may not be decided by the morning of November 4th. And a lot of lawsuits may start to fly once that happens.
Claire Finkelstein is a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania. With a record number of ballots coming in by mail, she says the counting period will be lengthy. If a candidate declares victory on election night, but then more results come in, there could be cause for recounts, especially in states where the results are close. That could mean litigation over the counting procedures.
Each state's elector will cast their vote on December 14th. Then Congress meets on January 6th to count those votes and name the winner. If no candidate has a majority of the electoral votes, or if the counting period goes on and the election is still undecided, it is possible that the House of Representatives must decide. Finkelstein says that would be extraordinary and complicated.
It would likely be very contested as well, but one way or another, by January 20th, there needs to be a new president being sworn in.
Finkelstein says this election is also entangled with the new Supreme Court justice, like for Pennsylvania, which could now see a decision on allowing mail-in ballots received up to 3 days after Election Day. The Supreme Court could also be involved in recounts, as happened in Florida in 2000.
Back here at home now, 15-year-old accused of being part of 5 family members who tortured and killed a 12-year-old West Yellowstone boy in February admitted to the beating that allegedly led to the death of his nephew. James Sasser III accepted a plea deal yesterday in Gallatin County District Court. He was originally charged with deliberate homicide of James Alexander Hurley in their Hebgen Lake area home last winter. According to court documents, Judge John Brown will not charge the 15-year-old as an adult. That was a real possibility due to the severity of the injuries the boy suffered at the hands of his grandmother, Patricia Batts, his grandfather, James Sasser Jr., and his 18-year-old aunt, Madison Sasser. Judge Brown also sentenced Sasser III, ordering him to stay in juvenile detention until he is 18 years old. After that, the judge ordered him to be on required probation until he turns 21 and remain in mental health counseling during the entire period that he is detained.
Well, coming up after the break, we'll talk live with candidate for Montana Governor Greg Gianforte. We spoke with his opponent Mike Cooney yesterday. This morning, it's Republican Gianforte's turn to explain his plans if elected.
But first, let's check in with Anthony Mason to see what's coming up at 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, the latest on the campaign and the record-breaking week of new COVID cases. Plus, more women of color are running for national office than ever before. Hear how some are hoping to inspire a new generation of lawmakers. Also, for many Americans, Election Day is a work day. We'll show you what some major companies are doing to make it easier for their employees to vote. And first on CBS This Morning, the unveiling of Bubba Wallace's new race car. He's driving for the new NASCAR team owned by Michael Jordan. Wallace joins us to talk about racing for the NBA legend, NASCAR's only black principal owner. All that coming up when we see you all at 7.